Welcome to Happy Planet, an impact economy podcast where we speak with entrepreneurs, investors, and thought leaders in search of profit and planetary health. I am your host, Abigail Carroll. Today I'm welcoming a good friend to the podcast, Lisa Scali. As you will hear, our paths have intersected many times throughout our careers. As the co-owner of Oceans Balance, she's part of a growing effort to capitalize on the nutritional and ecological benefits of seaweed. You heard our company mentioned in episode 4 as part of my conversation with Blaine Grimes of Gulf of Maine Research Institute. It's great to take a deeper dive to understand how Lisa is carving out a U.S. market for locally grown seaweed, working with fishermen and fisherwomen in Maine, and developing new and delicious products. Welcome to the podcast, Lisa.
Hi, Abigail. It's great to be here today.
Well, I am going to let our listeners in on our personal history. You and I first met at grad school at Columbia University. I think probably, if not the first day, the first week, definitely.
Yep.
And that was a 2-year program. We both lived in Paris at the same time. And then a few years later, we ended up living just blocks away from each other in Portland, Maine, and both working in the Maine aquaculture industry. We've had like parallel lives.
Yeah, we have. It's been so funny. And I love telling that story. I love how we basically did so many of the same things without even knowing it. Like we were in Paris for how many years before we actually ran into each other? That part I love.
Well, it is funny. I mean, we've intersected, and now sort of in the last few years, we've been able to actually see more of each other and really build a good friendship. But it is really funny that we've both came from this perspective of France and global affairs, and we were both in banking for a while, and that we both ended up in the Maine aquaculture industry. I sort of got in it by accident, but I feel like you had a different way in. You were much more thoughtful about it and decisive. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. So I guess if I had to describe myself with one word, it would be foodie. I grew up in an Italian family where all we talked about and still talk about is food. You know, we put a meal on the table and no sooner are the plates set than we're talking about what are we going to eat at the next meal. We are very obsessed with food in my family, in a good way. And so it's always been an important part of my life. And when I had the very good fortune to work in Paris for all those years, my love and knowledge of food was really broadened and deepened with the introduction of French cuisine. I had a reputation among my banking colleagues as the person to go to for restaurant recommendations in Paris because I just loved the restaurant scene and I was so taken with the food. It was part of me in a way that I could never deny and that I always wanted to embrace more. And when I moved to Maine, to Portland in particular, I was really struck by the food scene that we have here. I mean, you know, how many James Beard Award nominations are awarded to Portland every year? The food scene is just thriving and exciting and delicious. And as soon as I arrived, I was like, God, I'd love to be involved in this food scene somehow, but I just wasn't sure how to make that happen.
What year did you arrive in Portland?
2006. I'm very happy to be in Maine. This is definitely where I needed to be. Even when I lived in Paris, as much as I loved it, I felt very landlocked in Paris. The Seine is not the same as an ocean. And I'm so happy to be so close to the water and to hear seagulls out my window every day is just, it grounds me. And I think for the rest of my life, I'll always live by the water. It's really important to me.
I'm with you.
So yeah, this food scene is swirling around me, and I get a call one day from a family friend who, like us, has kind of a parallel life. He also went to SIPA, and he then went and lived abroad for a few years and made his way back to Maine. And he was very interested and still is very interested in impact investing and very interested in the seaweed and aquaculture space in Maine. He founded a seaweed company. He founded Oceans Balance. And the ink was still drying on the paper when he called me and said, so what do you think? I've just started this company. Would you like to do sales and marketing for a seaweed company? And I didn't hesitate for a second. I said, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. And I haven't looked back. And so it feeds the food soul of me. And it also feeds a part that was just kind of ringing in my head. It's, you need to make something yourself rather than working for somebody else. You really need to make something your own and just create it from scratch with someone, yes, but something that you can call your own. And this Oceans Balance project has just been exactly that. It's been such an adventure, and it's been very satisfying, both from a culinary perspective and from a personal accomplishment perspective.
Just on that note, there's a risk return there. You have this wonderful sense of accomplishment, but you're always kind of dangling off a cliff when you're in a startup. You've got payroll to make, you've got responsibilities to others in a way that you just don't have, even if you have a big management job in a public company. Have you felt that?
It's with you every single day. It's not like you can just say, oh, it's 5 o'clock, I can go home now. There's always more you can do. There's always something you haven't done, and there's always something that desperately needs to be done immediately. That part is what gives you the drive to keep going. I think it gives you energy in a way that just kind of doing it for somebody else doesn't. When you're doing it for yourself, it's like, well, this is yours. You're not going to screw this up, right? You want this to work. And that's really motivating for me. It can be tiring at times, for sure. And when you're, juggling the rest of life, it can get complicated. But it is, at the end of the day, very rewarding on a daily basis.
That's amazing. I completely empathize with everything you've just said. But when your partner asked you to join, he asked you to join a seaweed food company. So you are on the cutting edge of a whole new industry, making food in the United States. This is something that in Asia, they've been using it forever, eating it forever. And in the States, we've been using it mostly as an additive. But you are trying to put seaweed forward in food products. So you're not just starting a company, you're really a pioneer in this whole industry. Tell me about that. Tell me about trying to convince Americans that seaweed is something that they should be incorporating in their daily diets.
I think I should start by sharing a shocking statistic. 95% of the seaweed that is consumed in the United States is imported from Asia. And that is a number that can be reduced easily because there is so much seaweed that grows here in the United States and that should be consumed, not only because it's good for you, and I'll get into all of that in a minute, but just because of environmental impact of just eating something that's produced domestically rather than, put on a ship or...
Right, the carbon footprint.
Yeah, the carbon footprint is just much smaller. That's a great motivator right there. But then seaweed itself. Seaweed is one of the most nutritious foods that you're ever going to eat. It is a natural source of iodine. Iodine is something that is really important for our thyroid, which regulates our metabolism. If we don't have enough iodine, we feel sluggish. We don't digest our food as well. And when you and I were growing up, we used to get our iodine from iodized salt, right? But most people now eat fancy sea salt that doesn't have iodine added to it. So there aren't that many foods that naturally contain iodine. Seaweed is a great exception to that. So iodine, first and foremost, a great reason to consume it. But it also has lots of iron and calcium and potassium and magnesium, like all of these important minerals. It's got prebiotics. It's got antioxidants. We like to call it Mother Nature's multivitamin. And it has all these natural glutamates. So this word umami that people talk about, seaweed is packed full of it. Those natural glutamates enhance the flavor of the foods that it's mixed with. So it acts as a natural flavor enhancer in a way that is much more healthy and I'd say more interesting. So very good for our bodies. As a source of food for the planet, it is a very good source of food for when we think about sustainability. When we grow seaweed, and at Oceans Balance, we farm it and we wild harvest. When we're farming, we talk about the fact that seaweed requires obviously no arable land because it grows in the water, no fresh water because it's growing in ocean water, and no fertilizer. So there's no negative impact. And as it grows, it actually absorbs carbon. That's its vitamin. That's what it needs to grow. So in absorbing carbon, it's reducing ocean acidification, which is really important for the shellfish industry, for example. You know that well from growing your oysters. Having a water level that is low in acid will result in much healthier and harder shells. So it cleans the water as it grows, and it improves the biodiversity of the water that it grows in. There are more fish and more kinds of fish that are observed in areas where seaweed grows. So it's incredibly important for the planet. And as the population grows and we need to feed this place, we should be thinking about feeding people in a way that doesn't harm the planet. And then finally, from a social perspective, especially here in Maine, we partner with lobster women, fishermen, people who spend their lives out on the water. They farm seaweed for us. And seaweed grows kind of counter-cyclically to the traditional fishing season. You put the seed in the water in November, and you pull it out of the water in April, May. So it grows over the winter, which is traditionally a slower time for fish. So it allows these lobster women and fishermen to diversify their income. So they're not reliant on fish only. They get to use equipment that they already have. They get to stay on the water doing what they love. And they're contributing to a growing industry. So from a social perspective, from an economic perspective, to Maine, it's really important.
That's interesting. So are some of these fisher people that you're contracting to do this work, are they creating their own farms, or do you have a farm that they're working on, or how does that work?
So most of the fisher people are creating their own farms. They know the area where they fish. They know their water better than we do, and it's closer to home for them, so it makes more sense for them to have their own farms. We do have farms closer to home, if you will, to us, and we farm those in partnership with other organizations, sometimes some other fishermen. But I would say most of the fishermen who are not as close to Portland are using their own, yes.
That's great. It seems like it's kind of a no-brainer as the lobster season slows down to be able to do this. What are some of the challenges of growing seaweed? Is it a straightforward thing, or are there diseases? What are some of the things these guys face out there on the water?
Seaweed farming kind of starts in a lab where the baby seaweeds are created, if you will, the little seeds. And it's a cool process. It's a tank that there's recirculating water in that tank, and you have PVC pipes that are wrapped with string. And you release seaweed spores into that water, and the spores eventually attach themselves to that string. And for like the first week, it just kind of looks like it's string floating around there. But after a week or so, you'll notice like a pale-ish, brownish color. And then a few days more go by, and eventually it looks like some moss is growing on there. And then by the end of the month, you have completely covered string with the little baby seaweeds that are starting to be long enough that you can see them individually. And at that point, it's time to put them in the ocean. So during that time when it's growing in the tank, sometimes there is a risk of other things that might have been floating around with the spores when they were released contaminating. So that's something you have to deal with.
Contamination, yeah. How long is that time frame? Like, how long are they in the lab?
About a month.
About a month. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it's time to take them out onto the water and plant them. You see my air quotes there. And at that point, you're going to wrap that string around nautical rope that is attached to buoys on either end. And you let that rope fall into the water, so it's underwater. And 5-6 months later, you will have a 15-foot blade of seaweed that you can harvest. Like
wow.
A whole rope full of them. It's amazing.
Right. Because you basically create a forest.
Yeah.
And is it all kelp that you're farming now, or are there other types of seaweed?
We're farming 2 different kinds of kelp, sugar kelp and skinny kelp. And skinny kelp, as the name might suggest, is a bit thinner. It doesn't have the frilly edge that sugar kelp has. That kind of looks like a lasagna noodle. It's straighter. The skinny kelp.
Yep.
They just thrive in waters in Maine. They love all that nutrient-rich water. The tides are pretty strong here, and the currents are strong. So, there's plenty of nutrients that they can absorb as the water's swirling around them. It just makes for great growing conditions.
So, in fact, it's just the water passing through them. It's like oysters, except they're not filtering. Technically, it's
right.
The exposure to that water that transports them their food, basically.
Yes.
That's really interesting, and it sounds like a lot less work. No bag flipping.
No bag flipping, but you do need to go out there and check your line, because
yeah.
God knows what is floating around in the water, and storms and things. So you do need to check and make sure that the lines don't get crossed. Stuff can happen.
Have you been out on these kelp farms, and what's it like?
I have been out. In the earlier days, I did go out and help check lines and things. Tell you, I never had the proper boots and my feet were always frozen solid. But the one thing I do remember, we were out on a very, very foggy day and you could barely see 2 feet in front of you. The person we were with knew the water really well, so he knew where we were, but I didn't really. And all like out of nowhere, just another boat just kind of appeared out of the water. It was really like a movie set. And it was actually somebody that we knew, and he was just coming by to say hello. But the way he literally just appeared out of the fog, it was so cool and ethereal and very atmospheric. It helped me forget I was really cold.
I remember being on the water in the winter, sort of with icebergs kind of floating by. And there was something just really like exciting about being on the water when normally most people think you're not supposed to be out there on the water. There's something really kind of exciting and exhilarating about that. So I totally get it.
Oh, it's so gorgeous out there in winter. It's beautiful.
Stick around to learn more about Ocean Balance's award-winning products and the future of the company. For a blue economy to thrive, people need to use more sustainable products. But which products? And will consumers actually adopt them? Innovators like you are hustling to figure this out. Spark number 9 can tell you if there's demand for your product. Spark markets your product before it's built using online advertising so you launch smarter. Have a big idea? Vet it with Spark before you build. Visit Spark online at www.sparkno9.com or find them on LinkedIn. Maine Venture Fund is a state-sponsored venture fund here in Maine with a mission to support the highest potential Maine-based startup companies by investing early-stage capital. Maine Venture Fund's goal is to accelerate job growth and economic opportunity for the people of Maine. Learn more at mainventurefund.com. Welcome back to Happy Planet. So you've got the sort of vertical chain of production of seaweed, and then what happens? How does seaweed end up in our shelves?
We have a line of pantry items that contain seaweed. And what we are trying to do is to put seaweed into products that people already know and are comfortable eating so that seaweed is no longer that thing you eat at a sushi restaurant. We want it to be something you eat every single day. And it doesn't have to be limited to sushi or miso soup. So we're creating products that are a little out of the box in terms of what you would associate seaweed with. One of our more innovative products are pasta sauces. So these are classic tomato sauces. They're delicious. One is a spicy and one is a traditional marinara. And these sauces that are on their own very tasty. And this is coming from an Italian woman. To say that they're tasty, that's a real badge of honor right there. But because we've added that seaweed to this tasty sauce, all of a sudden they become a great source of that famous iodine, but also iron and potassium and calcium and proteins. So it's a really healthy sauce. It's just a great way to help people transition to including seaweed in their diet a little more regularly. So pasta sauces are one thing. We have a line of seasonings as well. There are 3 that are classic spice blends, and they're lemon pepper, chili lime, and a seafood combination of spices. And these are mixed with seaweed, and there's no added salt. So the salinity is coming from the seaweed itself. And for people who are concerned about sodium intake, these are a great choice. I'm very happy to say that one of them, the chili lime, actually just won a Sophie Award, which is...
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah.
Congratulations.
It's put together by the Specialty Food Association, and they recognize excellence in the specialty food space. And the chili lime won a gold medal in the most recent round of competition, which was just this spring. So very excited about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Now, does that help get you on a bigger map?
A little bit. Yeah, it is. It is. And it's yet another award that we can add to our list. And it really helps us say with confidence that we are an award-winning brand. So those 3 seasonings, and then we have 3 sprinkles. We call them seaweed sprinkles. And these are inspired by Japanese furikake. And furikake is a rice seasoning, and it's a blend of black and white sesame seeds and seaweed, and then different flavors. We wanted to keep it fun, but we also wanted it to be healthy. In ours, we've eliminated all the oil. We've really drastically reduced the sugar and the salt. They're great on avocado toast and egg sandwiches and noodles and baked potatoes and grilled fish and grilled meat. We also offer a kelp puree, and the kelp puree is for people who know seaweed already and are looking to include it in their diet, perhaps because they have an iodine deficiency that is pronounced. We also find that seniors are very aware of the fact that as they age, their metabolism is slowing. So they're trying to just help keep their metabolism in check. So they're looking for iodine. So this kelp puree is seaweed mixed with water and lemon juice. And it's a shelf-stable ingredient. So you can open it up, take a spoonful, and stir it into your sauce, your smoothie, your soup, your stew, your salad dressing. It's really versatile, and it's super easy to use. And that was a finalist for a Good Food Award a couple years back.
And does that add that sort of umami flavor to whatever you're stirring it into? Or
Exactly.
What is the flavor profile of that?
To try it on its own, it tastes like the sea. It's like a vegan oyster in a way. It's got a nice little brine to it. It's lovely. So I use it if I'm trying to make like a vegan Caesar salad dressing. I'll use this to replace the anchovies.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Because it does have some, it has a nice salt content, the flavor from the salt of the ocean. So you can use it for substitutions like that. But let's say you're just putting it into your tomato soup, which is actually very delicious. The umami of tomatoes and the umami of the seaweed blend together, and you've just got this incredibly flavorful tomato sauce. So I love putting it into soups. I also like sometimes playing around and doing a sweet and salty thing. So sometimes I'll put it in desserts. I make a kelp fudge.
Oh,
it's
wow.
like kind of like a white fudge. So it's got a lot of cream and sugar and Lyle's golden syrup, which is kind of like a cousin to caramel, if you will. You boil that all up and you add the seaweed to it. And it's got this great texture because this fudge is super smooth, but then you have these little bits of seaweed in there. And you've got that super delicious sweetness from the fudge and that, savory flavor from the seaweed. It's an amazing combination.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
My kelp fudge is delish. Yeah.
So is that the line?
And then we have organic dried products. So we have whole leaf and flake products, all of which are organic. And they are in reusable, compostable bags or tins. Always trying to be mindful about what we put our products into. And those are, you use kombu to make miso soup, you use wakame to make seaweed salad, but you can also use it just to make a regular salad. And then dulse, which is everybody's favorite seaweed. It's native to the North Atlantic. It has a wonderful, smoky, meaty flavor to it. And it's the one that is often used as a meat substitute. We like to call it the vegan bacon of the sea. It's the one I'll eat out of the bag straight. It's that delicious. It's the one that I'll fry up in a little bit of oil and I'll add it to a sandwich of lettuce and tomato and make a DLT instead of a BLT. And, I'll also do fun stuff like wrap it around scallops. Again, replacing bacon, a bacon wrapped scallop.
I mean, it's just amazing, this huge variety of products. When you are in a grocery store, do people find you in a specific aisle or are you in a bunch of different aisles? Like how do you manage that?
It's a great question, and it's one that we think about a lot. The products, depending on what they are, define where they'll be found. There isn't really a seaweed category per se. Many stores have an international section where you will find dried seaweed. The pasta sauces are in the pasta sauce aisle. So the challenge there is to create a packaging that allows the consumer, who generally looks at a product for about 6 seconds before they make a decision, so to communicate very quickly and effectively what this sauce is and why it's different from everything else on the shelf and why they should buy it. And then the 6 seasonings that I mentioned are all on the spice shelf of a grocery store. And that's another very crowded shelf. one of the reasons that we worked really hard to have 6 products as opposed to just 3 was so that we could command a little bit more shelf space and capture the consumer's eye when they're looking at all of the various things that you can buy on that shelf. There's so many things in the spice shelf. The challenge is to have packaging that communicates well. And we're actually going through an exercise right now to update our packaging. And it's almost ready for prime time. I'm not going to share too much about it just yet, but I'm very excited about the direction we're moving in. And I'm really excited to show you what our new packaging is going to look like.
What are you trying to communicate through the packaging? It just seems like such a heavy lift. Although I know there's momentum in this category. So that might help at this point.
It does. No, there's definitely momentum in this category. Celebrity chefs like David Chang have done a lot to raise the profile of seaweed, and others as well. Jamie Oliver did a whole thing. He went on a diet and made seaweed a big part of his diet. He lost a lot of weight and just talked a lot about the nutritional benefits of it. So it is making waves up at the top where people are seeing it on a more kind of day-to-day basis. When we think about the people that we're trying to get in front of to tell about our products, obviously there are millennials, and the millennials are just hyper-focused on making good decisions about what they eat, right? They're trying to eat locally, they're trying to be mindful of the environment, and they also want it to be nutritious. So seaweed definitely ticks all the boxes for them. Parents who are looking for healthy food that their children will actually eat. Little kids know a lot about seaweed, surprisingly. There are some seaweed snacks out there that I think have helped. Those products are imported, yes, but it has introduced children to the idea of seaweed, and just the concept is no longer such a foreign one. And I spend time in grocery stores telling people about our products and doing sampling. And it's always such a fun conversation when a mom will walk by with some kids, or a dad. Gently, I'll say, could I offer some pasta sauce to your kids? And usually they'll say yes. And the kids will try the sauce and they're like, oh, this is really good. And then I'll tell them, oh, there's seaweed in that pasta sauce. They're like, seaweed? We love seaweed. Mom, Dad, can we get this? It's like, it's great.
Too cute. Too cute. And who can say no to their kids?
There is that momentum building. People, I think, on a certain level, they know that they should be eating more seaweed, but a lot of people don't know the reasons why. They're not fully aware of all the nutritional benefits, and they don't understand the level at which seaweed can be impactful in terms of preserving our oceans. And those are great conversations to have. But it's like one by one, right? You just keep talking to people. There are more and more players entering the market. So I'd say the sound level is moving up, and we're all talking about the same things. So it's just awareness building, and you do that by bringing out new products, by going into stores and talking to people, by doing effective social media, going to school. Yeah, I mean, my daughter will say that I've been to visit her school a couple times and talked to her fellow students about seaweed. It's true, and the kids love it.
Do you feed them seaweed?
I feed them that fudge. They all love that.
Very good.
But I do give them pieces of seaweed too, like the dulse that I mentioned. That's such a flavorful one, and to let them try that, their eyes open wide, and just, wow, this is amazing.
You've got a whole slew of products. Many of them have won awards or runner-up for awards or nominated for awards. You are making all these products yourself. You are designing them and figuring them out yourself. Is that correct?
We are a very food-focused group, I have to say. We're all really foodie, and it's important as we think about new products. And we test a lot. We talk about what we think are good ingredients. We come up with ideas. Some of them are actually really bad. Some of them are terrific. And we work with people whose opinions we respect. So yes, the ideas start with us, depending on the product. Sometimes we make them. Sometimes we work with a co-manufacturer who has, the big machine to make the product. At the end of the day, the ideas are oceans balanced to start with. Yes.
It's everything starting in your kitchen with your culinary tradition, your familiar tradition, your experience through travel. It's all coming through in these products.
Oh yeah. I mean, we try to get together around the holidays each year and everybody brings a dish to share. And it's amazing what people come up with. We've never said like, oh, bring a seaweed dish, but everybody tries to bring things that are made with seaweed. And we've just come up with such fun, delicious, exciting ideas and recipes. And, the love of food really binds us, just as it binds my family. I'd say it binds the company too.
So you've got distribution all over the country.
We do.
And that's super exciting. Congratulations on that. I think I remember you telling me once that there were some Asian grocery stores. Have they been big supporters in general? Do you feel like the Asian American community is early adopters in this because it's culturally familiar to them? Are they interested in these hybrid sauces where you've got a little bit of the West, a little bit of the East? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
You're right. Our retail distribution has grown tremendously. We're in about 800 stores now across the country.
Wow.
And yes, and many Asian grocery stores have picked up our products. The product that I love selling to Asian grocery stores is the kelp puree, because Asian people have a very intimate relationship with seaweed. They eat it every day. It's such a part of their daily diet. And when they try the kelp puree, and this is kind of anecdotal from going to lots of trade shows and having lots of different people stop by, people who have grown up eating seaweed as a child, when they taste the kelp puree, it's just fascinating to watch their facial expression. They just like get this look of like, oh, I've gone back to my childhood.
It's like
they
Proust.
Love it. Yeah, exactly.
The Madeleine.
It is their Madeleine. It is their Madeleine, exactly. And I love that. And I love the fact that they appreciate the product, not only because it's nutritious and environmentally compelling and all that, they just love the way it tastes. I love that.
Yeah. Outside of food production, which you're in, like what are some of the other things about seaweed or applications for seaweed that you think are really exciting right now?
There are so many different applications for seaweed. Food, of course, is what we're looking at right now, but there is a lot of work being done in terms of packaging, using seaweed to make consumer product packaging. So it'll be much less harmful. Won't be getting rid of all this plastic. It's also being used a lot in animal feed and pet food. And on the animal feed side, so this is, cattle and livestock and things like that, it's being added to their feed, one, because it's healthy, and two, because it enables digestion to happen a bit more easily. And I'm sure everybody knows cattle contribute massively to global warming and the general pollution of the air. And so by feeding them seaweed, they're just not burping or farting as much. That helps keep all of that in check and reduce it. That's becoming more widely accepted cattle feed and developing new products for the livestock industry.
Does the seaweed have the same effect on humans?
It does. So people put kombu into their beans, all kinds of bean dishes, because it will help break down the beans a little bit and just make them easier to digest. And that's just a gentle way of saying,
I think that just sounds like a tremendous selling point. Hard maybe to talk about, but
digestion is part of food, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
And well, that's really interesting. Is that part of your plan to go on to other areas, or are you sticking with food? What's the big vision?
So food for now, for sure. We have a lot more that we can do with food. The pet industry is something that is also interesting, and we're looking at that as well. I don't, for the moment, see us wanting to create alternative packaging solutions, but we might be part of the process, if you will.
That would be exciting to sell seaweed and seaweed. You're in over 800 stores and well into the 7-figure revenues. It's super exciting. How many years has this been? How long has it taken to get here?
So the line that we are proud to call our own really came to be in 2018. I think the stars aligned in terms of the growing popularity of seaweed and the acceptance and desire to grow it here in Maine.
Tell me a little bit about Maine, because Maine is exploding right now. Everybody's moving to Maine. There's a lot of innovation. We have the Roo Center. We've got the ocean clusters. We've got GMRI building a fund. And then we've got sort of the MTIs. Certainly you're giving jobs to people on the water. As a young company, are you getting support from the Maine ecosystem?
Oh, yes. Definitely. I mean, I'd say seaweed companies are kind of one of the darlings right now in Maine. So there is a lot of help out there from a mentoring perspective, from a technical assistance perspective, financing. There's a lot of good things happening out there. And we've tried to be really thoughtful about how we approach the help that is there. We don't want to go to the well too many times. When we have a specific question or a specific need or a specific idea, then we will talk to the appropriate people. Maine is a small place, so word gets around quickly about innovations in the seaweed industry in general. And that's also great because it just keeps that momentum building and getting faster. But yes, we have felt tremendous support here in Maine, and I'm really happy to be here in this space right now.
That's great. So you've got all this momentum, you're coming up with new packaging, you're making good money now. What are the next steps?
So, 800 stores sounds like a great number, doesn't it? But there's a lot more stores in the country. We have just lots more work to do to keep telling our story and to keep coming out with innovative products and make sure that they are of the best quality possible, keep winning awards. We want to be a brand, no matter where we are found in the store, that people recognize. And that is a goal that takes time and persistence and needs to be very thoughtfully done. And I think we have found the right combination of people and messaging and products to make that happen. And so we're just going for it.
So you going out to the market, you're going to fundraise. How have you built this company financially?
So we bootstrapped for a long time, and I'm sure that's not an uncommon story. We did a round of financing last year, and we are doing another round right now that we hope to finish up by the end of the summer, early fall. As I mentioned, we're expanding that sales force, right? So there's more expenses that come, and some of the production ideas we have are also a bit capital intensive. So there's lots of good uses for this money that we're raising, and we know that it will be transformational for us over the next 2 years.
That's great. So what advice do you have to other entrepreneurs out there who might be in your 2018, just coming up with a product and a dream and a vision for a better, happier world?
Yeah, make sure you really love it. You have to love it, because if you don't love it, nobody else is going to. So you have to be very committed to your idea. I think you have to have a very clear message and why you're doing what you're doing and why it's different. I think it's important to be different. And this is going to sound interesting what I'm about to say. You have to be patient, but you really have to be impatient too. So you have to get things going, but it's always going to take longer than you think. But that isn't a reason to slow down. It just means you should, throw a few more things out there and just always have a lot of things going on at once. And just make sure you can handle it from a financial perspective, and make sure you believe in what you're doing, because that is the most important thing. I think one of the reasons that I'm successful when I present our products is that my passion really comes through, as I hope it's come through during our conversation today. Genuine passion can't be faked. People recognize it, and it's what spurs people to make decisions, and it's what spurs people to make change. So your genuine enthusiasm and your genuine commitment will take you far.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, it's been so great having you here today. Lisa, thank you so much. Have you incorporated seaweed into your diet? If not, has this podcast encouraged you to try? Feel free to share your thoughts via email or social media. Since the recording of our podcast, I'm delighted to report that Lisa closed the first half of her seed round, and the Norwegian VC firm Catapult is one of their investors. They have also been awarded a NOAA grant to study sustainable seed production for North Atlantic kelp aquaculture. Their newest product, the award-winning seaweed seasonings, is now at Raley's, a Northern California grocery chain boasting 115 locations. And let's not forget the seaweed. Lisa says they are preparing to plant this season's crops now. Thank you for listening. Please follow Happy Planet Podcast wherever you listen and leave us a rating and review. It really helps new listeners discover the show. Happy Planet was reported and hosted by Abigail Carroll. I am the executive producer. The talented Dylan Hoyer is our producer and editor. Composer George Brandel Egloff created our theme music. Learn more about my work and get in touch by visiting happyplanetcapital.com.